folks, and welcome to another 2020 edition Truetone Lounge. Today we have, a favorite of mine, and one of the great Telecaster players, someone who has, continued to make new and exciting records, and so many times artists will keep making the same record over and over again, and Jim is always experimenting with new things, and his latest album with Luca Benedetti is
Luca Benedetti.
Luca Benedetti. I apologize. Is
Yeah.
fantastic. It's the two of them, sitting down and playing some kind of jazz standards, and I love Jim's playing. And Jim, you can hear some of his influences in his playing, but he never wears them out, and just a great proponent of the Telecaster, and not using a bunch of effects, and we'll get into all that. So thank you for doing this, Jim.
Oh, thank you. I'm a fan of your show, and I love your show. I'm a fan. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning the show on an interview that you did with the Fretboard Journal. And so in turn, I'm going to give props to the Fretboard Journal, since you mentioned them there, and to Jason for what a great magazine that he does. And
Great magazine.
Yeah, and I think the next issue has Leventhal and Roseanne on the cover, so I'll have to pick that up. So yeah, so one thing I've been interested in, how obviously Roy Buchanan was a big influence, and you met him, and because he signed the back of your Strat.
Yeah, it's right up there. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Tell us about meeting one of your mentors, and someone that I guess maybe not a mentor, but someone that that influenced you greatly.
Well, I can't remember what year it was. It was probably early 80s, and I was still, a young man, and it was pre-internet. And I remember I had seen him when I was in high school, which is like 74 or something, at the Berkeley Community, whatever it was, Arena or something, Coliseum. And it was good, but it was just huge. And so a number of years later, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, I was driving up Broadway. This is when I was in San Francisco, and I saw at the Stone Roy Buchanan. I saw a parking spot. I did a legal U real quick, got in the spot and ran in the Stone. And Roy was playing, and there wasn't hardly anybody there. And I mean, you just could walk up to the edge of the stage. And the reason why I said it was pre-internet is, I mean, I could actually see what he was doing, which at the time, I mean, you weren't sure, like at the time, at least for me, I wasn't sure if anybody used hybrid picking.
Right.
And I saw that, and I saw that he bent something from behind the nut, and it was just amazing to see, and it was a really good show. They were a little inconsistent, and I used to kind of enjoy that as well. But I ended up I'd go to every show after that. I mean, if he was playing, 2 nights here, 2 nights here, all in the Bay Area, whatever, an hour and a half away, I'd go down and see that one. And like I said, some of the shows were a little inconsistent, but they were always kind of fascinating. One time he had like All Hell's Angels in the backup band, and there was All Hell's Angels in the audience, which was fine. I mean, I felt fine, but that was like weird. And another time, some guy brought a Mesa Boogie, and it was in a Berkeley show, and the guy kept on going on stage and changing the settings, and during like Roy's solos. But the guy was actually improving on it, in a way. It was like a little less traditional Roy and real, like almost like a Marshall-y sound. But anyway, one of those shows, I brought my 62. Should I get up and just show it?
Sure.
My 62 Strat. And I knew the doorman. And at this place, it was the Stone. And you could see it says "Live Happy, Roy Buchanan," and I brought this in, and I said, "Hey, can I go backstage after the show?" And the guy was like, "Fine." So they opened the green room door, and I guess I'm like 23, 22, and I just couldn't believe I was seeing him. Like, it was kind of like seeing Abraham Lincoln in 3D. Like, Roy would turn his head and it would kind of shock me. Like I see his profile, it was just surreal seeing him because I had just stared at record covers. And again, this was pre-internet. So basically, I mean, I literally didn't say one single word. And I took the guitar out and I had a pen. And he said, "Do you want me to sign it?" And I said, I just nodded, and he goes, "Here." And I go, and he goes, "Here." And I go, I just couldn't speak. So he signed it. He gave it to me. And I think I went like this, like as a thank you. And as I put the guitar in the case and I was leaving, just euphoric. It was like I felt just so naturally high from meeting him, and I got his signature. He goes, "Hey," he goes, "drive safely now." And I guess he thought I was like drunk or something. But anyway, that's how I got it signed, and I'm really glad I did. And I played this guitar for 10 years. When I got it, it was baby blue. It was this color. And this is kind of what happened over the years. And it's a really nice Strat. It's a 62 Strat. So a real nice guitar. Every now and then, if I see like Jeff Beck play or something, I'll be like, I had to play the Strat again, because the way he uses the vibrato bar so expressively. But anyway, that's the Roy Buchanan story.
Yeah. And that, incredibly rare because that's a matching headstock too, right?
Right. That is incredibly rare. I mean, I got that. Well, it must have been 80 or something like that, and it was like Fenders and Fender amps like went out of style, kind of. It was like Lab Series or whatever. They had new stuff, and I had I can't remember what, like a GR something guitar synthesizer.
Right.
And, I liked it, but I never used the synthesizer. I mean, I think I used it, there was fifths or something on top. And I was, starting to kind of get sounds out of it and stuff, just like plugged into the amp. And a lot of times people go, "Wow, that synthesizer is really great," and I was starting to think like, it's actually not the synthesizer, but I mean, I was, not that it would make me mad, but I wasn't using it. So I basically traded that for that. And I kind of had a feeling like one would go obsolete before the other. I mean, I've always played Fender amps. I mean, it's the only amp I've played through. I played a 54 Les Paul. I mean, when, 3-4 guitars into my guitar hood. But I've never had a guitar with humbuckings either, ever. It's kind of strange, but I've always liked that Fender sound, and I really love that guitar. And I actually liked it when it was baby blue, even though it's nice to see the color change to whatever it is, kind of a smoky green, I guess.
Yeah, it looks great.
It does. It plays real good too. I actually brought it to a session about 1.5 years ago. I brought this and I brought that, the Strat. And we had to do 3 or 4 songs. And on the first song, I used that. And on the second song, I thought I'd use the Telly. And I played it and I thought, I kind of missed the Strat. And the producer said, "Hey, why don't you play the Strat?" I ended up playing the Strat on all 4 songs. And, it was like, it's like riding a bike, it's a little different, but I mean, I played that guitar for 10 years. So doing, grabbing the vibrato bar and everything kind of came back.
Yeah. Did you find yourself overusing the tremolo bar when
No, I mean, I wasn't. I use it. I mean, I almost think like this thing, like the whole, you know, I saw 11th,
Right.
that whole neck shaking thing. I think is a result of wanting that sound when I started playing a telly.
Yeah.
I missed it, and it's all. I mean, in a way. I mean, now I just like the sound, but it also kind of hides tuning stuff. I mean, if you're playing a D chord or some chord that never sounds in tune,
Right. Where whenever you have thirds. Yeah.
Yeah, is that it? I mean, just sometimes D is like, what's up with D? But if you do this, it sounds nice. So I
Yeah.
think it was in part those both things. But that's how I use the vibrato bar, kind of just to shimmy.
Well, and then that's interesting that the fact that from playing the Strat and having a tremolo bar, you started kind of shaking the neck, and I've always wondered where that technique kind of came from, because it seemed like it was I don't there were it seemed like there were some of the New York players kind of started doing, like Bill Frisell and others were kind of and yourself were kind of maybe some early proponents of that, and it became more and more known during the internet age, and you started seeing more and more players that started doing the whole shaking the neck thing. So
That's an interesting observation I've never thought about, but I can't think of anyone I'll just shooting from the hip, like 75, who ever did that.
yeah.
I mean, and there's some guys, I mean, can you? There's some guys that like did everything. They got every sound possible out of a guitar, but I don't recall anybody,
Yeah.
doing that thing.
There's times where guys would use it as an effect, like they would just shake the neck,
Yeah.
but not for using it as a subtle kind of vibrato, like, yeah. But it's a neat sound, and guys that really control it by the way they hold the guitar, and instead of having it being exaggerated when they where they're almost like doing some type of body English thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe too, now that I think about it, I mean, I hope we're not beating a dead horse here, but it could be a chorus, like having chorus than not having chorus, because it is a chorusing sound.
Yeah.
I used to have I had the first chorus, I think was made those Roland metal boxes.
Yeah. The
And
CE1.
they had a stereo. I think I sold it, which I regret just so I could look at it again. But right now, but yeah, maybe it's that too. I don't know. Between those two things, choruses, because it does sound like chorusing. And I used to use chorus all the time and a bunch of effects and everything. And sometimes I still miss, having like a whole note. But that said, it's nice to have an intimate relationship with your right hand and the strings. And sometimes with distortion or whatever, I feel a little removed from that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how did you get into more of the minimalist approach, as far as, well, I mean, basically you plug straight into the amp most of the time. I mean, how many times do you actually use an effect? I mean, a pedal effect or something like that? I mean, I would say,
well,
fairly rarely.
Yeah, rarely. I always use this jam. I think it's pronounced Wahako Wawa.
Okay.
I've been using that for about 2 years, but I almost use it as a tone control.
Right.
If I click it on and come all the way up, I get kind of woman tone.
Mm-hmm.
The Clapton thing.
Yeah.
And sorry, and so I've been kind of doing that. I kind of wanted really a third sound, because I feel like, I mean, I get like maybe 2 or 3 basic sounds, from the telly, and I kind of wanted just that little overdrive, and personally, I kind of like the the woman tone approach where it's like, kind of McLaughlin-y or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and who's, one of my heroes. And so I've been using that. Sorry, I'm getting messages. The past couple of years, but I used to use everything. I mean, I used to have a bunch of Boss effects and all that, and I had this digital metalizer, a Boss digital metalizer in stereo going out to a Fender Twin, and one of those Fender amps with the red knobs that it kind of went out too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
A 12-inch of that, and I like those amps. I mean, I kind of think they're underrated in a way. I mean, I wouldn't make it my primary amp, but I think they're good. I never see them. But I play in stereo and all that, and I just started like weaning myself off it, one by one. I remember playing with a Vibrolux, which I ended up playing for years in the 10-gallon Cats and all that stuff, and it just sounded puny to me, And now if I play through a Vibrolux, I'm like, wow, this is great. I have a lot of headroom and I could control the dynamics of the band by telegraphing a dynamic change. Headroom for me represents that aspect of playing. And I could play a lighter touch if I have more headroom. Sometimes I find myself downstroking to project.
Right.
If we get really loud. And with the Vibrolux or even a Deluxe, it's still like, oh yeah, I have headroom.
Right. So you haven't hit the ceiling on the amp, which
right.
which is a neat sound, but still it's difficult when you're playing and you've hit that ceiling and you've got no place to go. So
yeah, that happens. Okay, it'll happen as often as one might think, and generally I'm mic'd. And when I'm mic'd, it's great. I usually don't, for years now, I kind of have a no monitor, like let's have no monitors and start with no monitors.
Right.
And I think it's the best way to, obviously we're not like doing 3-part harmonies. It's like generally I'm in an instrumental band, but even when I played with Nora or Martha Wainwright, I'd always go from, I want nothing. And if I could like walk over 2 feet and hear that better, that, because as soon as something comes from a monitor, to me, it seems like it's not, I have less of a chance of playing music.
Yeah.
And it does like really color my sound. So anyway, I kind of went off and
yeah. I might sound like a horrible person, but I think one of the worst things is when you start getting drums in the monitor.
Yeah.
That starts getting, crazy. It's like you're too loud. It's like, move closer together, figure out some way to be able to hear each other without having to throw so much stuff in the monitors. And then of course you have, in-ear monitors, which completely take away any type of spatial, nature, because when you move around, it doesn't get louder when you get closer to the drums or whatever.
Yeah, I only had to do that once. Maybe somebody who's got more those kind of experiences can have more to say, but I didn't like it. And a couple of times like mistakes happened, like they some shriek happened.
Right.
And it's I'm no prima donna, but it was like, hey, I don't want to go deaf.
Right.
But yeah, and the drum thing, that's another, even they mix the drums these days too high. I think they're too influenced by modern mixes where I think the drums are too high. The music I really love, and there's, not to narrow it down to any one thing, but is, 60s Buck Owens, 60s Merle Haggard, Johnny Paycheck on Little Darlin', it's country music with steel guitar. On Together Again, I know it's grooving like crazy, and I think in part of it is the acoustic guitar, but you don't hear do do cack, it's ludicrous to me. Yeah. And I hear this, and it seems, I don't know. I don't know what came first. It's like it's influenced by dance music from the early '80s or something, and they keep that. I don't know. I don't like it.
Yeah, I think, part of it has to do with you had, so many drummers that were learning jazz, that were coming up 40s, 50s, 60s. They were being taught by more people that were influenced by jazz, and people that were playing smaller drum kits. I mean, they would be called cocktail kits at this point. They were small.
Yeah.
They were playing with brushes, and you had, when you listen to, Buck Owens, and it's like, or most of the, country albums from the 60s, or, you still had guys that weren't trying to slay the drums, and they weren't, competing against, 100-watt stacks. And so you end up with very different music when you have a smaller drum kit and not trying to take over. So
Yeah, it's funny. The other day, Green Onions came on.
Yeah.
I mean, which is, I like never get sick of that song. I mean, I've heard it 10,000 times and I'll stop dead in my tracks. And like the drummer is really, what's his name? Al Jackson?
Al Jackson Jr. Yes.
Yeah. Is not really whacking the drums, but if you see a group play Green Onions, it's, it's kind of sounds like, Green Onions meets Black Sabbath or something,
Yes.
And I think that's the beauty of like Al Green and that whole era, is it's understated. And you hear the story, you hear the vocals, and you hear everything really clearly, and it's grooving.
Right.
So,
yeah. Not to sound like,
Yeah.
the old guys. Yeah, there's this, aspect of being able to hear their space. You can hear the different instruments. It's like you mentioned Green Onions. I love listening to, Booker T and the MGs. That's something I listen to on a weekly basis, because it's like you hear the organ or piano, you hear the bass, you hear the drums, and you hear the guitar. And another realization is, from the more I listen to that, the more I realize that Al Jackson, the drummer, was the most important member of that band. And it was, again, I maybe heresy to be ranking them, but of course, when you're a kid, it's, Steve Cropper, like he's the great, and then it's like, that Duck Dunn. I mean, he's doing it, and then it's like, no, the great organ parts. But then it's like, to me, the longer I listen to him, the more I think that Al Jackson was the one, and that, of course, after he passed away and they tried to do other things, I mean, you can't ever go back to paradise. You can't ever, you can't go home. So there's this aspect, but it's kind of like, it's hard for me not to think, well, I think it's the, Al Jackson Jr. that, kind of made a big difference in his, in his drumming. And it's obvious the later drummers that they had in Booker T and the MGs after Al, passed away, they all tended to be rock or fusion drummers, and they were great, but they didn't have the feel that Al Jackson Jr. had. So, all right, I'm going to get off my soapbox. So,
okay, no, I'm with you, and I agree, and I don't think it's totally crabby old guy stuff. I hope not, anyway.
Yeah. So but what was it specifically that got you off of using pedals and going straight into the amp? Was it more of the because there is a level of, when you don't have any pedals and buffers and anything in between your guitar and amp, there is a more tactile differentiation as you move where your hand is picking on a string. It seems like you lose some of that the more stuff you go through. Was it that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of coincided with me getting a Telly and wanting to fully commit to playing country guitar. I also, I mean, I think I told this story before, but I went to this store on Haight Street, and there was this like really strange guy owned it. Like, I mean, he was the kind of guy you'd go in and he'd kind of like act like you didn't, like you shouldn't be there. It's the kind of guy, which I kind of like, he was like a weirdo, like kind of give you a dirty look, but not like a record store snob or something like that. Like, this guy was, I liked him, but anyway, I got a Telly, and I was like, I like this one Telly, and he kind of interviewed me. He was like, so is this gonna be your primary guitar? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And I was like, I hope that's the right answer. This guy might not sell it to me. But he asked me, he goes, and he was like the guy in the beginning of the movie Moby Dick who the crazy guy who talks to Richard Basehart, like looks in his eyes and predicts their future. Anyway,
Yeah.
his like, eyes are really intense, and he goes, "Do you use effects?" And I said, "Well, sometimes I use a Chandler tube screamer." He goes, "Do not do that. You cannot connect with the audience, and they know it." And I was like, "Okay." Like, so anyway, I bought the guitar, but it kind of, I don't know. I mean, I sound really overly impressionable, but I kind of thought, I think I know what he means a little bit. And the other thing that I really enjoyed, I mean, it was hard, but I enjoyed it. And I see it to this day is the first three songs, guys are bending over,
Yes.
dialing in their sound. And I tell you, the middle of the first song, it's kind of like, okay, this is the hand I've been dealt. Maybe if I step over here, okay, that's better. I start playing music faster. And I'm
Yes.
not, I've played with Nels Klein, and, the guy brings 2 feet of effects, and he's brilliant and great, and he immediately starts playing music. So I'm not insinuating that, that's impossible. But for me, like that ended too, and I kind of like that. And I also enjoyed, I think that was the last thing I used. I had like a rack, a Chandler tube screamer or tube driver. Had a
Tube
little,
driver. Yeah.
yeah. And the band I was in at the time was like, hey, don't, just plug into the amp, it'll sound better. And I did, and I agreed. So it was a slow process, but when I got to Telly, I was like, yeah, I really want to sound like all the guys I'm listening to. And, it was like not only Roy Buchanan, but Hank Garland, Joe Maphis, Jimmy Bryant for sure.
Right.
Um, and that is a clean sound, and I generally have a little dirt on things more than the guys I've just said. But, it seemed like I actually got good enough to where it was advantageous. Like I developed a touch. Like, I mean, it wasn't like everything was compressed. So this, sounded cooler to me going straight into the amp instead of if it was compressed and everything would be more even. I mean, I don't know if that's a great example, but
No.
to make a point musically.
No, absolutely. That's a great point because when you compress, a guitar, and especially when you play the low strings, that's where it becomes the most rubber bandy sounding and loses that kind of doinky quality that
Yeah,
that a good vintage Telecaster, pardon me, has, on the bridge pickup. And it's like when you lose that doinkiness, it's kind of like, ah, you know,
I love that.
yeah, starts it sounds
Doinkiness.
yeah, instead of rubber, yeah, I'd rather have the doinkiness than the rubber band sound. So, that just
Yeah, but and yet compression is great, and that was a hard give up too. I think the compression. I mean, if you're going to do harmonics, I mean, if you have compression, they do it really brings things out. So
right.
but that said, you gain your low notes, you gain more of a dynamic control. You lose harmonics that aren't loud or a sustainy sound that's whatever this kind of thing like sounds good. Sounds good compressed. I mean, or I don't know if that's a good example, but you know what I mean. Like it doesn't have to be loud, but it's nice sometimes when things even out, and it does sound a little more like a steel guitar, which I know we both love.
Yeah. So how did you get into country music? Because again, being, you've been, New York City, San Francisco, is like, how did this, I mean, again, some of us don't realize that, of course, country music, had, there was a lot of country music in California and things going on there, but what got you into those players?
Well, it was. I mean, probably the first thing I heard was Lonesome Fugitive off Roy Buchanan's first record.
Right.
And I think I was 12, when I got that, or some 13, something like that. And, I liked it. I mean, I liked the story. And, and then there was like Allman Brothers and stuff like that. Like I'm a kid in an Italian suburbia in San Francisco. So it's not, the country capital of the world.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's more like Montrose, that kind of thing. Montrose, you just leave the house and you'd hear Montrose, or you'd hear, Black Sabbath Paranoid and stuff like that.
Right.
And, I mean, what really changed for me, because I liked it, but, I was in a bit of a void. I mean, it was really hard to find what was good. I had seen Hee Haw and, was completely alienated by it. I mean, I probably like it more now, but when you're, a stoner hippie and you're 15 and you're listening to Wheels of Fire, or whatever, and you see, Hee Haw, it's kind of like, yeah, that's not me. But I think I was maybe 18 or 19, and I went to this record store, and I was buying records, and I saw Merle Haggard live at Muskogee.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw it, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is that guy that hates hippies and, like, doesn't smoke marijuana. and I thought, and it was $1. It was $1, and I was like, I'll get it. It'll be funny. And I brought it home and I put it on, and, I don't know when, but I heard If I Had Left It Up to You is on that record. And it's just a lovely song. And I think it was something I was experiencing at the time. It's hard to remember, and I tried to learn the solo at some point. I mean, this is over a couple of days. And I kind of thought like, oh yeah, I'll get this. Because, I was young and dumb, and I was amazed at like the muscle it took, and it sounds, it's just the melody and some slurs. And that was the beginning of it. And at the time, I think I had listened to this one Muddy Waters Chess Masters double album for like a year. I mean, it was all I listened to was Muddy Waters. And as I still love Muddy Waters and, all the blues stuff. I mean, because that's kind of what I was listening to prior to this. But what really made it change for me, aside from the fact I love steel guitar and I loved the guitar work, was that I really understood the lyrics. It wasn't about mojo or something like in a language I didn't speak or in an era that I didn't know, even though I dig it, I still do. But the lyrics really, I completely understood them. They were simple. They said exactly what they meant. And I still love it for that. I mean, Together Again, there's no imagery there. I get it. And so coincidentally, and I feel like I'm talking too much, but coincidentally, my cousin had a country band, kind of more a wedding band. And he played accordion, Lou Firpo. And they were like a wedding band who started as the country band, but started doing weddings. So they do like the anniversary waltz and stuff like that in the first set. And then by the, second set, it would be some Hank Williams and stuff like that. And I was young, I think I was 20, maybe 19 or 20. And Lou asked me if I wanted to be in the band. I did a gig with them. They were super nice, and they were actually really good. And that really got my foot in the door. And we played Elks clubs all the time. We were the house band at this one Elks club, Eagles Halls, where you can really learn your craft, it's one thing now, when sometimes I get students from New School or whatever, and these guys are great, they're the same age I was back then when I was just, kind of, just in a void. and these guys are really informed, but they don't have those kind of gigs.
Right.
Where, I mean, I was playing at least 3 times a week, maybe 4. And, I can't say like I improved in, an incredible amount. I think more so by studying records really made me improve. But it was a great way to learn. And more I was humbled by the music. Uh, it was I kind of thought it would be easy, because I had heard the Allman Brothers and Blue Sky and stuff like that, and it was kind of like pentatonic scale. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll just do that on this. But the more I played, and I did, now and then they'd have somebody really good in the band. And this one piano player they had for one gig, and we did, I forget what song we did, but I remember, it's weird. I remember it was in G and it went to C and then D7. But I was playing and I thought, wow, that's really good. What's he doing? And basically he was going like G major, G7 with an F natural, C. And while he was soloing, and that was a real revelation to me. And I thought, wow, that's really nice. And, I didn't know it at the time, but, it adheres to the principles of Bach. We're playing a G7, which is like a secondary dominant of the 4 chord. And that kind of opened up some stuff too. And I started to understand what Roy Nichols was actually doing, where I kind of needed that revelation because when I'd learn, I'd go, well, F sharp worked the first time, but now it's F. Is it if you're ascending or descending? Like, I really didn't know. So that was a big part of it. And, I've loved it ever since.
Yeah, that Haggard record is fantastic, and it's really interesting hearing Roy's version of like Working Man Blues versus Burton's original, just to hear the difference in their, even though he's kind of miming the solo for Burton, but just his tone and attack and everything is so different and so himself. I mean, he kind of owns it. So
yeah, I mean, it's a great record. I love the rap too, like Merle's going, "Are there any truck drivers out there?" And the mayor gives him the key to the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great record. I was really lucky to find it, and I bought it as a joke.
Yeah.
It'd be like Sean Hannity has a record.
Yeah.
Something, for black.
Yeah, I get it. It's funny, Hee Haw, even the performers on Hee Haw, I mean, it was like you had all these, kind of cornpone comedians, and you had, Buck and Roy, and Buck has even said, in hindsight, that it destroyed his recording career, being on the show, even though he made a lot of money, because even in Nashville, that was seen as being very, over the top, kind of silly, kind of a caricature of country life, but people seem to love it. At least a certain audience did. But it's fun to watch those shows and see the old players and the gear and everything. So
I'd always been curious to revisit it, now and see if like, oh wow, Jerry Reed's on there or something like that I was oblivious to, but I just remember it as being, like, just
yeah.
girls with the tied tops and guys like with a piece of wheat, I mean, the music, I really don't even remember the music, to be honest. My dad used to watch it, I think, probably for the girls. With all due respect.
Well, they did have, good, musical guests, and there were times where things were pre-recorded, but, you had, some of the, top, a lot of the top players in, Nashville were part of the staff band. You had, Charlie McCoy and golly, Honeyfingers. Golly.
Buddy Charlton?
No, the guitarist. Buddy
Leon,
Charlton. Leon Rhodes. Yeah, you had Leon Rhodes playing guitar, and you had.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there's this whole era, there's different eras of the show, but especially like in the part of the 70s and 80s, Leon Rhodes was the guitarist, and in the staff band, and Charlie McCoy led it, and they had this whole era where they had the $1 Million Band, where it was Chet Atkins and Johnny Gimbel and Boots Randolph, and they would do an instrumental, on every show. And so, yeah, there were different eras of the show, but yeah, there were times but they always had the corn pone, humor going on that was so over the top. It was, even for a Southerner, it was kind of like, wow, it's just,
yeah, I mean,
really.
Yeah, I like I said, at the time, I mean, I would go see my great grandmother, and she didn't speak English. She
Wow.
only spoke Italian. So
Yeah.
it was a bit of a culture shock. I mean, but that said, after that initial, that thing with my cousin, there was a great country scene there. There was a bar in San Jose called the Saddle Rack.
Okay.
And I think a couple of guys, I can't remember his name, darn it, a guitarist that was like a house guitarist there, ended up moving to Nashville. Big Reggie Young fan. Bill Hullett.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill Hullett used to play there. I never saw Bill Hullett, but I know that, and his kind of guys played there. But I was lucky enough to meet Joe Goldmark and Bobby Black, and this guy named
Right.
Doc West. I don't think anybody's heard of him. He was a, kind of a loner, but great guitarist. And yeah, I really learned a lot playing with him. Again, it was like seeing what it was. Like, oh, that's chicken picking. Like, I tried doing it, but now I'm seeing somebody do it.
Right.
And he's doing it better than me. So that kind of raised the notch a little bit. With Joe, Doc West, I was trying to find the records, was like I was obsessed with it. I used to go to this record swap meet in Emeryville, which was across the bridge. And I think it was at 6 a.m. Sunday morning. It started, and I used to get there at 5:30. I literally would buy LPs out of people's trunk. And Doc had told me, I said, where can I get some steel guitar records? And he said, well, there's this thing called the Steel Guitar Record Club, if you could find those. And he goes, Joe Goldmark will know. And I go, who's Joe Goldmark? And he said, oh, he runs Escape from New York Pizza. So I went there. I think I called him, and he said, I'll make you a cassette. I said, fine. So I went there. He wasn't there. And but the cassette was there. And this cassette changed my life. I mean, Joe has an amazing record collection, and he knows all the history and everything. He'd be a great interview. Literally wrote a book about every record that has steel guitar he catalogs. But there was, it was like finding the Dead Sea Scrolls or something. So I just wore this cassette out, and then I started trying to buy the records or people affiliated with those records. And, I guess now I'm 30 or something. So it was a long, slow road.
So what, if you had to list a couple of those records that really, kind of floored you the most, that, really changed you the most, which ones would they be?
Well, that's a really tough one. Certainly Live at Muskogee, probably Jimmy Bryant, Speedy West, Two Guitars Country Style.
Certainly.
Also the Stratosphere Boogie one. I think that's a Jimmy Bryant record. So there's Speedy West, Jimmy Bryant steel guitar. Definitely that with This Ain't the Blues, open
Right.
track 1, I think. Then the one that Jimmy Bryant put out with Billy Strange on the cover.
Oh yeah, Country Cabin Jazz.
Country Cabin Jazz. So those definitely. And then on the not so obvious, obvious between nerds.
Yeah.
This Billy Bird record called I Love a Guitar. There's a girl on the cover, holding a guitar, and it's called I Love a Guitar. It has 2 different covers. The other one just has, I think, a generic cowboy playing guitar. But anyway, that record I learned everything on it, and again, it really taught me how to play a melody, and because that's all Billy Bird did, but the kind of Djangoisms, as I would describe them as. I mean, like real guitar.
Yeah.
Like you can pick up an acoustic and you can do these little slides and slurs. And I really studied that record a lot too. And Hank Garland's on rhythm guitar on that record, by the way. I mean, to some people it might sound Muzak-y. So, if anybody's going to run out there, and I don't know how much the record is, I mean, it's kind of Muzak-y, but like I loved it and I learned everything on it. And it was actually a little easier to learn that than, the solo to Stratosphere Boogie or whatever. So it was kind of doable.
Yeah.
And I learned those, do do da da, all the Billy Bird-isms that
Yes.
kind of make you legitimate. And,
where you kind of climbing up, playing the second to the third and then hitting the tonic up on the high E string. Yeah, those kind of things.
Those really still sound beautiful to me. And some things I learned, like I wanted to get a bunch of endings. So if I had a pickup gig, I mean, sometimes it's like the guy who plays like the obvious ending is like, oh man, like, thank you, and there was a lot of them in there.
Right. And so people all end on the same note.
Yeah, when you do, or sometimes that saves the day.
Yeah, and to hit on what you were saying earlier, it's surprisingly hard to play simple melodies well on the guitar and with kind of authority and conviction, and that's it's so to just play a simple melody on the guitar, sometimes it can be really hard to do that in a compelling way. And by doing it, you kind of learn that better. So,
I mean, I totally agree. And I think a lot of guitarists, like myself, in the beginning, like I could play pentatonic and, do Allman Brothers, but to play the melody was tricky. And everyone knows if you're going to miss the note. But I just do that more and more and more, especially if I do a session. I mean, I really pay attention to the melody of the song. And a lot of times for my solo, unless they want something that's a total departure from that, like, oh, it's time for the solo, but
right.
I'll just play the melody and, and change it up a little bit. And usually like the songwriter loves it. And I like it too. So the melody is very underrated, and Billy Bird is a great source of how do you play a melody? Maybe less so, but another example is probably Willie Nelson.
Yeah. Certainly.
He plays the melody, and it does the job.
Yeah. Always, one of the albums that I can listen to over and over again is Willie Nelson's Stardust. It's like, and it's these, that was one of the first album, kind of concept albums revisiting the American songbook, and Willie's just playing straight melodies. It's like he's never doing anything crazy. He's playing the melody of the tunes on his gut string.
Home run. Like, I thought you were going to say Redheaded Stranger, and I wouldn't have been snooty about it. I mean, It's a great record. My favorite Willie Nelson record is Over the Rainbow, which is right around that era that you named with Stardust.
Right.
And it's a great record, and it's one of the ways I learned standards. Too, because, again, growing up in a void of like Montrose and Deep Purple or whatever,
right.
Like standards, I knew I was supposed to learn them, but they sounded like, what's this? Like, it's autumn in New York, it just sounded like, what is this, Frank Zappa? It made no sense. And that record really helped me identify in the same way when I mentioned the Merle Haggard record, like these are songs I can really relate to that speak to me very clearly. And Billie Holiday did that to me too. I mean, I really went into Billie Holiday and heard those standards that, some people deem as like an exercise from jazz school. But you hear what they're really about, and I always do that. If I learn a tune, I always make sure I know the lyrics. I try and, like an actor, like what's my motivation?
Right.
I always know the lyrics, or I'll look at find the history of the tune. I mean, maybe I'm slow, but that's really important to me. But anyway, yeah, I love both those Willie Nelson records.
Yeah, there's so much to yeah, the best session guys, they really pay attention to the to the lyrics. They really pay attention to the emotion that's trying to be translated, and yeah, that's what good players do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had to learn some things. I mean, there's some people that they're just the nicest guy in the world. Like Bobby Black, pedal steel player. But I learned that, like, when I do a session, I always go, I mean, it sounds a little harsh, but in New York it flies. Like, I'll go, in 10 words or less, what is this song about? Like,
Yeah.
because I don't want to hear like the guy's life story. And really what I'm looking for is 1 or 2 words, like, yearning,
Yeah.
jealousy, and if I hear that, I'll go, okay, I think I know how to, I'll give you my version of jealousy or yearning or love or abandonment or whatever. That's why I say the 10 words or less. It sounds a little terse, but like I said, in New York, you kind of get away with it because people are edited here and no one's ever been offended,
Yeah.
but that's what I do.
Yeah. It's always
And
direct.
excuse me, they're for interrupting, but they're happy I'm interested.
Yes.
You know,
And they should be.
Well,
That you're actually paying attention instead of just saying, these are some hot licks that I've worked up, and you're going to love it.
yeah, yeah. Can you change the key?
Yeah.
To,
Because I have this open string lick, and then I hit a harmonic. I bend it behind the nut, and I do this drop on the tuning peg, and it'll kill you. It'll kill you. So
believe me, I mean, that happens a lot. Like, and I don't say anything. I've worked with a few people that still sit on my shoulder, like Bobby Black, who's just the sweetest guy. Like, and he's great. Like, oomph when he plays, but he'd never go, do we have to do it in A flat? I had this whole thing worked out in G. It's like, sometimes it's like, okay, A flat it is. And let's see what we got. Like, and be nice. Just be nice. So, but what would you rather play a country song in G or A flat? It's tricky.
Probably in G.
Yeah. G, me too. I had a feeling you'd say G.
Yeah. So you mentioned Nora Jones earlier, and I was just curious because of course I had the both of the Little Willies records, and I felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it felt like that you were brought in to kind of legitimize the countryside project of these guys.
Well, not really. I mean, I I met, the backstory is, and I feel like I hope I'm not boring you and
No.
whoever's going to watch this, but um, when I was in San Francisco, I played with Lee Alexander, the bassist
Right.
producer who was in the Nora Jones first record and thereof.
Yeah.
Um, and we used to do this terrible gig. It was at this place called, I mean, I hate to do that. I sound cynical, but it made me really like him because we played at this place called Infusion, and it was kind of in the heyday of the .com thing, and it was like all these flavors of vodka, and we had to play in this stage, like in the upper corner. It was like, you know, like a go-go girl in a cage or something. But it was the hardest load-in of any gig I've ever done in my life. And Lee used to bring an upright bass, and he never complained. And I didn't do the gig a lot, but when I did it, it would just be me and him. And Lee was great. I mean, he was a really good bass player, but like I kind of admired him. You know, he'd be bringing that bass, and you couldn't fit through this stairwell. It's hard to explain, but it was just crazy small. Anyway, he moved to New York and kind of kept in touch. And I heard he met this girl named Nora. And I was like, oh, great. Lee moved to New York and met a nice girl. And then he emailed me, he said, hey, we're going to be in San Francisco. Me and Nora, you want to do a gig? And I go, yeah, let's do some country. So we worked up about 12 tunes. And I got I think Bobby Black was on pedal steel in that group. And Chris Key and Andrew Borger, who she ended up using as her drummer. Anyway, we did these gigs, and it was like Jim Campilongo with Nora Jones, you know, and so we did that, and it was really fun. And their first record hadn't come out yet, but when they came out, and I thought she was fantastic. Like
Yeah.
when I met her, I was like, I think she was 20. She was absolutely talented. I mean, and beautiful, cool. You know, I mean, I just felt like, God, can I invest in you? You know, but nothing had happened. Nothing. She was, you know, Lee Alexander's girlfriend who I ended up meeting and would totally admire. So anyway, then I moved to New York. And I'll make this short, even though it's long already. I was sleeping on couches, and they had a room open up, Lee and Nora, in this apartment. Okay, it was maybe 19 years ago. And they said, hey, you want this room? We got to go out on tour because we're putting out this record. It's on Blue Note. And it was back in the day. I mean, it was exciting, but it was when there was a record industry. So I kind of knew people who had records coming out on major labels. But, you know, so anyway, I got here and they were about to go out on tour, and I remember Lee took me for like a 10-minute tour. We walked outside. He goes, Jim, don't go left. And I go, okay. And then we took a walk, and he said, yeah, there's a dry cleaner or whatever. But I thought, what's left? You know? And they went out, and maybe 5 months later, I was sitting in this apartment on their little TV watching Nora get 5 Grammys.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
It was fast.
It was fast, and they got it right, in my opinion. Like, I mean, I don't know a bunch of, you know, major Grammy winners, but I'm telling you, she's really a great, great artist. And anyway, so it was a mob scene. This apartment was on the cover of the New York Post, and it said Grammy Queen's humble digs. And there was like a news crew of vans and everything outside. And they were trying to get in the apartment and, you know, all this stuff. And I started putting signs in the window, like of my friends, like ScottAmendola.com. You know, he's a jazz drummer in San Francisco. And, you know, I'd see the whole news people writing it down and everything. But anyway, when they got back from tour, we ended up doing the Little Willies. And so I was always a part of it. And in the beginning, I was almost more or less the band leader.
Right.
And I mean, in the perfect world, I mean, I would have wanted a pedal steel player, to be honest. But, you know, I mean, I think she's pretty legit. I mean, it certainly wasn't Nashville country or anything. And even my own playing, I'm surprised you say that, Zach, because I mean, I don't listen to it much, but when I've heard it on the radio or when it comes up, I'm like, man, that is really crazy. That is some crazy guitar playing. And I remember Lee and everybody was really supportive. Like I'd do a solo and think, oh man, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, and Nora would be like, all right, Jim, you know, so it was really nice camaraderie and they were super supportive. I mean, you know, I mean, I have to go through and revisit it. It was recorded super fast. I mean, some of the solos I hear and I'm like, oh, I could have done so much better, but it was done really fast. And I learned a lot. Nora has a real jazz mentality. So, you know, it was like 3 takes, man, tops. Like, and sometimes there'd be a key change in that take. And what I learned from her was if she did a couple of takes, she'd do it different. Like, I mean, each take would be a little different feel or a different this, or hey, can we put it up to C or whatever. And I hadn't worked that way. I would, you know, I'd be like, hey, can we do the same intro and the same song and I'll hone in everything. But it wasn't like that. It was like, let's make music that's right now. And of course, I cringe at some of my solos because, you know, it might have been the first time in that key. But that said, it's real.
And there's an energy and there's, you know, because they kind of gave you the freedom, there's an adventuresome to your solos and stuff on that, on those records. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't generic. That's for sure.
not at all.
I mean, if I, you know, I don't know if it was good, but it wasn't generic.
No, it was good. So you've, you know, you've made so many great, you know, solo records. You've got this, you know, duo record that you've done now. You've done more avant-garde things. You've done more, you know, but the new album with Luca is such a nice you know, pairing, and it's so nice to just hear 2 guitars being played well. Was that a fun album to put down?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, I mean, I don't throw the L word around, but I love Luca. You know, he's like a good friend. We talk on the phone once a week. You know, he's totally, his wife, Becca, is really, really sweet. And I think she's a scientist or something. And she's like super smart. So yeah, it was fun to be with Luca. But I mean, you know, my records, I kind of consciously plan them. Where I did the Jim Campilongo and Honey Fingers last night, this morning, just going back a few years,
right,
is kind of a produced sounding record, even though much of it was live. But we had a Django kind of style guitar with Roy Williams, Luca Benedetti playing Telly, me on Telly, and Johnny Lamb on pedal steel. So it was a big sounding record with parts and unity. And then the follow-up record is us, like, it sounds like a post, you know, apocalyptic trio, you know, which really captured what that band did and does, playing weekly for 2, 3, 4 years in New York City. So after that, you know, I thought, I've been, you know, thinking about, you know, me and Luca actually got together and a couple of guys couldn't make the gig. And so we said, well, we have to play. I think it was snowing or something. And I was like, okay, well, let's do it. We can do
Yeah.
it. And about 5 songs into it, it clicked. Like, I realized, and you said that I play sparsely, at the beginning of the interview. I mean, I notice the more comfortable I am, the less I play.
Right.
And that's what we started doing. Like, instead of going, like, it was unamplified, but, and, I saw the potential there. But it's like, one of the reasons I try and mix it up, I mean, just for my own interest, is it's kind of like, well, how many Jim Campilongo records can somebody buy? I mean, how many Danny Gatton records can you buy?
Right.
And I mean that because Danny Gatton's great, right? I mean,
Right.
he's the end all, Telly guy. But I don't have all his records, and I think it's part of like what I want to do is present something that's a side of me. But this 2 guitars, I was really nervous about. We are all aware of Lenny Breau and Chet Atkins, and the list is at Wes Montgomery.
Yes.
The more we learn, the more humbling it is. I mean, to know like how great and gifted some players are. Leon Rhodes, Billy Bird, even though he was, not playing Fly to the Bumblebees, he was a great artist. So I honestly thought, geez, if I do a solo record or a duet record, will I be showing how mediocre I really am, compared to those guys? And like compared to Lenny Breau or something like that, like do I have the facility and the imagination and the artistry to make a record that competes or can sit with, Herb Ellis and Joe Pass or something like that? And I thought, well, no, because I don't play that way. But when about that 4th or 5th song, I realized, oh, we're doing something here that's legitimate. And it isn't Lenny Breau, but I think it's good, and that's why I put out 2 guitars, and I am proud of it. Actually, I'm getting a different test pressing today, but about a month ago, I got the test pressing for it, and I hadn't listened to it since we mixed it, in a big hurry, and I put on the test pressing, and you have to kind of review that there's no skips and everything. We actually rejected it. First time it's ever happened. But I put it on, it sounded good. And I was like, wow, this is a really good record. And, sometimes you get lucky,
Yeah.
I almost think it's like a gift from God, like to make a record. And I'm not saying it's Sgt. Pepper's or, whatever, a masterpiece, but there's always something, like on Live at Rockwood, there was one song I really wanted on there. I thought this song, it was in a sentimental mood done live, and I really played it well. And I thought, yeah, it'll really round this record off. But the drum mics were off. And so it was like, shoot, and I'm not saying it now it's awful, but it wasn't exactly the record I could make. And we're all under the gun, like, you got to do it fast, and you kind of have to get lucky, too. And on 2 guitars, I feel like we got lucky. I'm real proud of it. When I listened to the test pressing, I was really met the record and thought, well, this is kind of a dark record, or a moody record. And I had no idea, because some of the tunes, I feel like I'm hanging on the end of a roller coaster. But upon listening to it, they're all melodic and it feels relaxed. And I was really happy with that. There's the song Denise that I really wanted it to be good. And it really came out in part because of Luca's accompaniment, because that's so lovely. But anyway, that's kind of the story of all my records. And
Yeah.
it's funny, Zach, I sent you this Bandcamp link, and I said, hey, you can check my stuff out here, and you don't have to buy like 14 records, so you can ask me a couple of questions, you know. But that said, I did this during the pandemic. I was like, I want to get off Spotify, and so and I've been trying to find stuff to do, as all of us. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get all my records and put them on Spotify. And man, it took about a week, because I had to physically write out all the liner notes. A lot of the stuff was lost. Sometimes I had to find the artwork and blah, blah, blah. But I ended up listening to all my records, and I was pretty happy with them. They've aged well, and it inspired me to put them out on vinyl. So I'm going to do the first 10-gallon cat record, which still sounds really good.
Absolutely.
I was really, I don't allow myself to feel like super proud, of my work or whatever, because as you know, it's you have to kind of go down the middle when you're a musician. I remember, for example, and I don't, when's this guy going to stop talking? But I got invited to go play with Pearl Jam. Okay, this was like, I don't know what year it was. I was given a lesson, and some guy like phones, and he's like, "Hey, this is Stone Gossard," and I was like, "Sounds like a superhero to me." And he's like, "Hey, you want to come up to Seattle and and play, and we'll record you." And somebody saw me play, and I was like, I don't know. And I held the phone, and I had a younger student. I was like, hey, do you know Stone Gossard? He's like, yeah, man. And I go, he's asking me to play. He goes, do it. So I go, okay, and I ended up going up there, and they were great. And I realized, like, wow, this is really a great experience. So I record with basically, Pearl Jam
Yeah.
in Seattle. But I had to leave because I had a Friday night gig, right? So I get to the Friday night gig. I'm like, man, I just played with like these major stars. And I remember about an hour later, the leader was yelling at me on stage because my sound wasn't distorted enough for Achy Breaky Heart. And I remember while he wasn't like shouting, but he was very unhappy. And I remember just thinking, like, I was probably like this going, the music business has its real ups and downs.
It does. That's the great thing about the music business, because it's like you go from doing a show at the Washington Monument and having amazing catering and having this wonderful experience, and the next day you're doing a county fair, and they have some lunch meat and some sweaty cheese on a plate there for you. And it's like, yeah, that's the great thing. It's like one day you're in a Learjet, the next day you're in the back of a van.
Yeah.
That's the music business, and that's the great thing on it. But I want to hit on a number of the things that you hit on earlier, and that's one, the fact that really good players that continue to be productive continue to challenge themselves and don't make the same record over and over again, and put themselves in situations where they're challenged, and they keep to stimulate themselves instead of just turning into a human jukebox that gets up there and plays their hits. Because that's one of the sad things when you see artists that become a caricature of themselves. And so it's the guys that continue to challenge themselves, and then hitting upon the fact that you've made this duo record. It's like, that's so hard, because there is that tendency to want to overplay because you feel like there's all this space. And it's when you're able to relax and say, okay, it's okay that there's space. There's two musicians here. We figure out how to interact with each other and how to make music. And there's not the pressure of having to fill every second. And that's when, there's space and there's beauty in that.
Well, it's a lot of it is Luca. That sometimes I'm not sure if. I think me and Luca have a real good musical chemistry. I'm almost sure, but he's the kind of real good artists create chemistry.
Yeah.
Like wherever they go. So, I'm not sure. I'm not Luca, so I don't know if he creates chemistry wherever he goes. I don't walk in his shoes. But if I was going to relax and trust somebody, it would definitely be Luca. Because, we did the Last Night This Morning record, and that's when I really started to really trust him, and he's got great ideas. And I love that record. I mean, I'm very proud of it. And we've ended up producing a couple records together, and we kind of work that way together. Like, we'll play something, and then we'll talk about it. We'll even say, like, yeah, let's just leave it open, and like, it sounded good when we got lost. So, let's take it from that point of view. Or on Minute Waltz, Luca did a part I really liked, and I said, do that part every single time, and he does.
That's a very beautiful tune. So yeah.
Yeah, I know Chet Atkins did it. I can't pronounce their names. It's like Los Indios Tabla.
Yes.
Those guys.
Yes.
Man, they have some good records. And they do it. It's just shredding, man. I mean, they're just like shredding on it. And I just thought, well, it's so pretty. Let's just do it slow, I mean, I can't really shred like those guys.
Right. So when you and Luca are playing together, especially on on this duo album, what are you thinking tonally and then harmonically so that you're staying out of each other's way? So
well, I mean, I don't think it's that much thinking, really. It's just, like, let's say somebody like Duke Levine, and I love that interview. And I mean, Duke Levine and Bobby Black and many, many players know what the music needs. Like, that's their artistry in a lot of ways, aside from being great, and can, shred and play beautiful and make great records. But they'll know what the music needs. And I think we both kind of have that sense. I mean, if it seems kind of, I didn't really think about it, to be honest, Zach. Like, right. I did ask numerous times at the session, I said, is my rhythm inspiring you?
Yeah.
And Luca would be like, oh, yeah, it's great, because I'd ask, because his rhythm was so good that I started to think, like, is my rhythm, is it dropping off at all? Like, and am I fully supporting Luca like he's supporting me? So that's probably the thing discussed. And as far as tone goes, it was kind of like, I brought my Gibson 225. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this duet record, and I'm going to play my Gibson 225. I play it all the time at home, So we booked like 2 days. And the first day, I said, hey, Luca, I don't care if we have a record. Like, let's just go there and have fun and play if we feel like it, and definitely get sushi for lunch at the place we like, and that coffee place at 5 with our engineer, Aaron, because that's like a little, we love to do that. Yeah. And I said, it'll just be a really fun day. I go, so no pressure. And I think I was talking to me more than him. But so I bring the 225, and something was broken on it. I forget what. And so I'm like, okay, I'll play my Telly. And for some reason, the amp was really buzzing in, treble and neck. So I had to play in middle. And it was kind of annoying, but I'm used to that. Sorry, my cord's all wrapped up. I'm used to that kind of, like, okay,
Yeah.
So then we did that, and so I think it was 1 day, maybe 2, and I tried to get it fixed, but then something else broke on the 225, so I'm back on the Telly, middle position. Then, like, another month later, which was the final day, I got my Gibson 225 all fixed. I'm like, yeah, I'll play my Gibson 225. So I bring it in, and something else immediately broke. Like, and so and the amp's still buzzing. And at this studio, it usually doesn't. I've recorded there many times. It's like, what's going on? It's like a New York thing, you know, like sometimes I play the 55 bar and the amp's silent. Sometimes I play the 55 bar. It's like a chainsaw.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, Telly in middle position. So we thought we finished the record, and I forget what month it was, maybe August or something. And I listened to it and I was like, you know, Luca, I think it needs a couple of more songs, and I think it needs like a structured songs. So we booked something in December, and I had to finish it by December 12th, 2019, because I had to get foot surgery because I had a nerve wrapped around in this bone on the bottom of my foot, and I had to stay off it for a month and a half. So we're like, we have to finish it, you know, this day. And I'm like, well, let's try to record 3 songs in the morning and then mix 3 songs in the afternoon.
Wow.
And I go, you know, it's kind of crazy. I go, but it's possible. And so we went in, and I had got the Gibson 225 all fixed, and I was like, yeah, it's going to be great on these. It was Mona Lisa, Nice Dress, and Blade of Grass were the last 3 songs. And something broke on it. And I was like, man. And so I turn on the amp, it's buzzing like hell. So I'm middle position, all the songs. And the Gibson, I brought it to Lou Feminella. And this is a guy who fixes guitars in Carroll Gardens, great guy. I said, Lou, I want you to make this guitar bulletproof. I don't care if you have to drill bolts through the front of the body and paint it a different color. And I said, I don't care. I just want it to be bulletproof. And he ended up making it bulletproof without screwing it up, of course. But the bridge was on backwards. There was a trapeze thing going on here, and it was the wrong one. I mean, there was like a lot wrong with it, and that's why it kept breaking. So, but basically, to answer your question and make a short story really long, Zach, you're a patient man. Every song is my Telly through my Princeton with the Celestion G10 speaker in middle position. But I kind of managed to get some different sounds, I think.
Yeah, no, again, you touch and where you play and everything, but that was interesting because just looking at the album cover, and they see the 2 Tellys and the 2 amps, and part of me thinks, okay, well, you've got the Princeton sound, and you've got the Brown Deluxe, which is very different tones. You kind of have the barky, woody mid range of the Brown Deluxe, and then you've got maybe brass saddles, and you've got steel saddles and stuff like that. So I guess there's some, and then of course the player themselves. So you had some inherent differences, because there's years ago, when I was a college student, they had Ray Flack come in, and everyone was just kind of shaking in their boots, and the head of the guitar department asked me to come up and play with Ray. And so I was really shaking in my boots. And the thing that really struck me, besides of course being completely, flattened by Ray Flack, was the first thing he asked me. He said, which pickup are you going to be on? And I was like, well, I guess I'll go on the bridge. And he said, well, then I'll go on the neck. And that was one of his first considerations when he was going to play with someone that he had the tones were different, and they weren't going kind of down the same road. And so yeah, even though I got flattened by Ray Flack, which was a great event, it kind of hit me in the fact that he was thinking from the beginning of that, we've got to be treading different territory, tonally. So.
Yeah, I love his. I've never heard his version, but this Tahitian Skies off Neck and Neck.
Yes,
man, that's a great record. I love that record.
Yeah.
But Ray Flack. I mean, I basically know him from an instructional video,
right,
more than anything. But I know he came up with the interview of you and Duke, and he has my eternal respect if he wrote that tune, because
yes, he did.
I've tried to rewrite that tune about 12 times.
Yeah.
It's like I'm always trying to write Sleepwalk. I'm always trying to write Tahitian Skies. There's a couple other template tunes that I think, oh yeah, I'm always trying to write that and haven't done it yet.
Beautiful, melodies, and they come out and you realize, oh wait, I'm playing Tahitian Sky. Or
yeah. I mean, I did a tune called "The Boat" off Table for One, and it's very Tahitian Skies. There's a song called "Maceo" off Orange, very Tahitian Skies. Like, I could even name the tune, full disclosure, but they're not even close. But it's that thing. And a song like "Sleepwalk," it's just one of those songs. It's like, I think this is in human DNA.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the performance and the recording, there's just some melodies, I feel like somewhere in my mind, I always hear "I'm in the mood for love." Like somewhere, like 24 hours a day, something's going, da, na, 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 na. At least maybe I sound wacky, but there's some melodies, I don't know. They're just like in our DNA, and Sleepwalk's one of them.
Well, so you've covered this, but on the Princetons, so do you always put those the Celestion Vintage G10 in there?
No,
no. You also use the old C10Q or C10NS or whatever.
I think it's a C10N. That's right there. I kind of label them. People ask me all the time, "Are you selling your amps?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. But that says Bobby Blackface.
Okay.
Yeah, because I got that from Bobby Black. And
Okay.
that has the C10N. I mean,
Yes.
let's go to jimcampilongo.com. I should, but
Yeah.
to see what it is. But I think it's a C10N, which is a bit of a robust speaker.
Right.
And I use that on all the Little Willie stuff.
Okay.
The G10 Celestion, it's right there. I'm wondering if I have two. And I think I do. I don't have that many amps, but I have enough. And I usually just use that all the time. I mean, unless I want like something a little twangier. But I like the G10 because it sounds kind of jazzy, for lack of a better word. I mean, it works on two guitars, for example. It's rounder sounding. So no, I either have one or two amps. Yeah, I think it's just one now. I might have sold one.
Yeah.
I mean, I just sell them to people I like, I mean, now I think I'm getting down to, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I have 6 Princetons.
Wow.
Yeah, but I got them, after I moved to New York, I had one Princeton. I brought it here. That was it. I brought like a laptop, a Princeton, and a suitcase. And one of the gigs, like the Princeton blew up and nobody had one. I mean, this is like 2002 and people weren't really using Princetons yet. I mean, they were, I don't know, maybe they were, but I didn't know anybody. And I thought, man, I have to get some Princetons, another one. And so I looked, and they were like $500-600.
Right.
And I think a year or so later, I got a publishing thing, and I had a little money finally, because when I first moved to New York, it was, it was like save the money, take the subway everywhere, bring, I had a little like hand truck for all my equipment.
Yeah.
But I made some money, and I was like, I got a feeling like Princetons are going to go up in value. Because I figured, like, I'm older than you, Zach, but we're kind of the template in a way. And I thought, everyone else is going to get sick of carrying a twin reverb. Yeah. I mean, I know I did. And they had everything, and they sounded really good. So I bought a whole bunch for nothing more than $800. And now I wish I bought more. And I did sell like 5 or 6 of them. But Bobby sold me that blackface, and man, at the time it was definitely worth like 800 or 900 bucks, easy. And I asked Bobby, I go, hey Bobby, you want to sell me that? And he was like, yeah, I'll sell it to you. He's like so nice, and he's like, is $500 okay?
That's a good price.
I said, yeah, that's incredibly generous. And not all the time. I'm not saying I'm, the best guy in the world or whatever, but that gesture, I try to reenact that. Like, I don't sell them for 5, but they're pretty cheap. And, if it's like a student who's great, who wants a Princeton or whatever, and now I don't email me, guys, but,
right.
I'll just sell. So I've sold about 4 or 5 of them, but I bought a whole bunch of them.
Yeah. And you've got them from all different, eras. You've got, Silverface, and you tend to use the Silverface ones as much as, or even more than the Blackface ones.
I like Silverface, I wanted to say, and I hope I haven't been gabbing too much, but one of the reasons why I think that amp sounds great is Bobby Black sold it to me for 500 bucks. Like, it makes that amp sing a little bit more, And I kind of like Silverface because they weren't like super duper expensive. And they sound great, I'm not like cheap or anything, but it just kind of adds to the vibe. I'm not saying if anybody buys, a Blackface amp for $3,000, it has no vibe. I'm not saying that, but it kind of gives me pleasure, like to know, like, yeah, the amp wasn't, super expensive, and it sounds great, Yeah.
So
that's why I'm telling us.
Well, to hit upon that, so then, how do you feel? How do you feel going around with a 59, Telly, around town? Do you, when you take a break, do you get nervous about your Telly?
Yeah, we're crazy. The thing is like, no. We were doing this gig, me and Luca, and at this place, I forget what it was called, but it was like this. They do vodka tours. We used to do the gig because no one would pay any attention, and we could practice, like 2 guitars. And man, we'd like leave our stuff there and go walk around in the park. It was right by the door. And I mentioned, I go, we have about like $40,000 worth of stuff up here. And knock on wood, but I just never want my stuff to own me.
Yeah.
I have toured the world with this guitar in basically a pillowcase. Like I get the cheapest gig bag I could find, and to kind of get like a hole in the bottom, from the little strap switch. And that's the first thing it goes. And I've been very lucky, and I put it overhead. I'm starting to get, like, I don't want to feel my heart in my throat, and they're getting worse now, or they were before the coronavirus. But yeah, I just don't. Me and Luca did a gig up in Canada, and I brought the Han, and it was like kind of nice to like, okay, I'm not going to like worry that I'm not boarding, and how they board really weird. You're like, you're in section L, and you're like, what? And it's like you're last to get on, so the overhead might be taken. That part of it does stress me out, but no, I figure like this is my guitar, and I want to play it.
Yeah, and it some Telly players get into collecting them and getting to where they own a bunch of Telecasters, but you seem to have really honed in on that guitar, and that seems to be really part of your voice. Even though you'll also play the Han that you have a signature model to, but and there's something to that where you really know an instrument well, where that allows you to play music instead of having to get comfortable, because you're already comfortable because this is a guitar you've been playing forever.
Well, that is true. Right now I'm a little out of I brought it out for the interview, but I've been playing this Duo Sonic, and the Duo Sonic, I'm actually used to that now. Um, and it has tens on it, and this has nines. I was like, God, these feel really slinky, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm just that way by nature, Zach. You know,
Yeah.
like I will play the guitar that is next to me generally. I mean, I have great instruments, and I'm very lucky to have them. But I mean, I have a nylon string, uh, and you know, I mean, I played that I think for about 6 months just because it was super handy, you know. And then you know, I'd play the Telly. I'd be like, man, this neck feels really small, you know. But I mean, yeah, this is a great guitar. It's really dynamic. I mean, that's the only difference. I mean, you might know more. You obviously know more about this than me, but to me, it's like sometimes students bring in these Stradivarius things, you know, like, hey, I got a 56 Telly or whatever. I really like that year or two. The next are a little more meaty,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the best Tellys I've ever played. And doesn't Duke have a 56?
Duke has a 53 Blackguard, and then he has a copy of it made by the custom shop that he's, you know, plays out with, and then he has a 63. But I think he used to play a 55,
Yeah,
you know, at one
then
point.
I'm mixed up. But the two nicest guitars, the guitars I was like, hey, I want this. You
Yeah.
know, I don't usually feel that way. We're 56s, but you know, the when you start getting into vintage equipment, I mean, a lot of the guys that can't afford them don't really know how to do what you can do on them. I mean, it isn't about, you know, it's that they're dynamic. Um, and that's what takes time, I think. You know, when I get a new guitar, it's like, oh, this guitar is not as dynamic as mine. Um, but I have like a 56 Duo Sonic, which is like a cheap guitar when they were making them. And man,
Right.
that thing's super dynamic. I mean, it's gonna speak no matter what I'm doing. You know, like I don't have to work to make it speak. You know, it's like that's really soft, and it sounds like something. Where a brand new guitar sometimes doesn't do that. And some of these guys that own the guitars, and man, I don't mean to be a jerk, you know, but it's like they aren't really capable of that.
Right.
And there's many things I'm not capable of. You know, I face that every day. But one thing is like, hey, I know how to be dynamic. I mean, I've been playing 45 years. You know, I mean, God help me if I can. Um, and that's why I like this guitar.
Yeah.
And I like everything about it, you know. I mean, I still love looking at it.
It's well, you know, it's got so much character, and it's, you know, it's been, you know, part of you for a long time, and it's just, you know, it's kind of like that's Jim's guitar. Yeah.
Yeah, the neck's a little small for me now, you know.
And those, I may be crazy, but those frets look big. Are they bigger than normal frets?
Yeah, I get the biggest fret I can get.
Really?
Yeah, and this is the second time I think it's been refretted. Yeah, I like really big frets. I mean, some guys like them in the middle.
Yeah.
Uh, I really don't like the original ones that like look like they're just kind of pencil drawing or
Right.
something,
Yeah.
or feel that way. But yeah, I like really jumbo frets.
And is that so much because you like the feel of it, or you like the fact that you can get a lot of fret dresses out of them before you wear them out?
No, it's totally a feel thing, and they feel bouncier to me.
Yeah.
Like makes me feel slightly more athletic, and I mean, you know, for what it's worth, and the bending thing's easier to me.
Certainly.
Um, you know, you could really bend far, and it slides. But yeah, I don't really go through them that much either because I have a really light touch on both sides, maybe to a fault. But I don't go through them. But over 25 years or whatever, I think this is the third refretting it got. and I was nervous about it. That's like starting to push it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, because you start, because every time you pull those frets out and you have to, and if they do any kind of planing or anything like that. So, yeah.
I had Flip Scipio do it, and I asked him, you know, Flip did Paul McCartney's Hofner bass from the Beatles. Like,
Oh, Paul who?
yeah, to give
Yeah.
some context. And he did Jim Campilongo's Telly.
Yes.
But I brought it to him. I'm like, hey, can you refret this again? And he was like, it took about a minute. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, done. I trust you. And he did a great job.
Yeah. And do you use the little, like Roy Buchanan picks? Do you use those little jazz picks, or what do you use?
No, I used to. I use them. I use those picks until about 5 years ago. So we're talking 40 years. Yeah. I used those white Fender heavies, and they quit making them.
Yes.
And they also changed the plastic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dude, I'm just going by intuition. But is this, you're confirming it, Zach?
Oh yes, they changed the manufacturer that was making them for them, changed, and yes, so they're not the same, not the same pick anymore.
So not to diss Fender because we all love them, but so I used them for about 5 years, even though I was like, I really don't like this, like I said, I'm kind of like that, like I'm a real creature of habit. So I was like, I don't really like this pick anymore. And then one of the straws that was ready to break the camel's back was they didn't make them white anymore.
Right.
And man, that's big. Like I always say, I wish I had the option to get pink or something of everything. Like everything's black, and we play in these dark stages, and you drop your string winder or whatever, and it's like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it's lost.
I just bought a pink suitcase.
Yeah, because you can find it.
Oh man, it comes down the turnstile. You're like, there's my suitcase.
That's right.
So when they stopped making the white ones, I took it personally, but I was like, I'll just keep using them. Anyway, a student comes over, a guy named Justin. Darn, I wish I could remember his last name. He's real good too. And he's like, you should check this pick out. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it's, what are they called? Geez, I should know. They're Fusion. I forget the brand name. I got it bookmarked. I just bought like a whole bunch of them. Sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
Okay. I got them bookmarked. Hell, where is that bookmark? Oh, here it is. V-Picks. Okay. I use a V-Pick, a Fusion model. And it's a little bigger. It's much bigger than the Fender heavies like kind of Buchanan used.
Yeah.
But, I always flirted with that. I'd pick up a Fender heavy and go, what am I using this little thing for? But then the hybrid deal, like, it felt like, two guys in a one-bedroom apartment,
I like that analogy.
And I'd be like, I'm going back to the little guy. But, and this thing, I mean, he gave it to me, and I used after like 30 seconds, I was like, I love this pick. And so he goes, you can have it. And it ended up, sorry, I got a nicotine lozenge going here. I quit smoking a while back.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. And so they're $5 each. And I'm like, Jesus, why do I like these? But they're totally worth it, man. They're great. They're just big enough to where my fingers, don't, I could, finger pick or do the hybrid picking thing. And then they like do not wear out. I mean, there's sometimes, I'm like, and it's like afterwards I look at it and I'm like, it's like a virgin pick.
Right.
So they make a real good product. I'm real happy to use them. And That's what I use. VPIC Fusion model.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of models, and on their website, there's like famous dudes, like I can't remember, but some country guys, like not Brent Mason, maybe I don't know, like a Brent
Yeah.
Mason types, and the guy from ZZ Top,
Yeah.
So um, they're good.
Let's talk about your Patreon page. So one, of course, I'd seen some of your posts, and then of course Duke talked about how you had kind of been coaching, mentoring him into this. So tell us about getting what got you into Patreon and how that's done for you, and then and kind of pushing Duke into it also.
Well, it started when I have like a young, I don't do him any justice, but like a young millennial friend. Like, and sometimes he speaks a language that I don't really understand, like whatever. He's a young guy. He's he's in that world. But anyway,
Right.
he said, you should do a Patreon. And I said, what's a Patreon? And, he explained it to me, and I said, yeah, I don't really want to do that. I did a Kickstarter once, and it was like a real pain, and I'll never do it again. And like, God love everybody who, donated, but it felt like begging, and to me, and I'm real touchy about that, and he goes, no, it's not begging. And I go, well, I'll check it out. So, and I ended up going to Italy. This is like 2 years ago. And I came back from Italy, and every time I go to Italy, I've been there like 4 times, I'm like, I want to move to Italy. I mean, I love New York and my life and everything, but have you been
Yes,
there?
I've been to Italy, and I love Europe. I spent 6 weeks in Spain last year, and I feel the same way about Spain. I go there, and it's like I want to live here. I don't want to live in the U.S. anymore.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And when I'm in Italy, my feet feel like they're magnetized to the ground or something.
Yes.
Like I don't know. It's so anyway, I came back and I was like, man, I want to move to Italy. So I like starting 2 years ago, I thought I want to be geographically more independent. So I got into this. So I checked out this Patreon thing, and I said, my friend's name is Joe. I was like, Joe, I don't know. It seems like begging. And he goes, most people just give $5, $10. And he goes, put so much stuff up there that it's not begging, that it's like a great deal.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you got a point. So I started it, and, I really enjoyed it. I mean, some of the technological stuff, like I saw Duke's, and Duke's like looks really good. I mean, mine I just do on my cell phone, and, there's no tab streaming across the middle, bottom, the bar is so high, right?
Yeah.
Most importantly, like the last 6, 7 months, like it's like one of the things right now that makes me feel useful.
Right.
I mean, aside from this interview and things like this, it's like we can't gig and, but it's kind of a porthole into being useful. So I really appreciate it. And, I mean, I'm not, making millions, but, it's something coming in, and it's a reason to think and have some pressure every week and go, okay, what can I do this week? What am I going to do next week?
Right.
And I really like it. Everyone's totally cool on my Patreon, and they seem to be satisfied with what I'm teaching. So for me and Duke, because that was part of your question, I just think Duke's like, underrated. And I'm like, especially, I mean, I've seen him play like he seems like the guy in Tom Petty on steroids to me. And that's, what's that guy's name? Campbell.
Oh, Mike Campbell.
Mike Campbell, like Mike Campbell on steroids. And I think Mike Campbell's great.
Yeah.
But like Duke's steel guitar stuff is like completely unique, you know. I know we agree. I could tell you were a
Oh,
fan.
oh yeah. I mean, he was yeah, the way that he bends strings and the muscle memory or whatever it is, the touch that he has when he's doing those pedal steel kind of bends is ridiculous. And yes, I've loved his albums for a long time. So
Yeah, and as you said, they're cinematic. They're just good songs.
right.
Like, I mean, you know, no, there's so much good music. You know, I'm not going to put on like some guitar record that doesn't have good songs on it that has great guitar. You know, I mean, um, and Duke's records have really good melodic music. But anyway, so I almost feel like in another life I could be like Duke Levine's manager, you know. And so, you know, I think he asked me about the Patreon thing, and I felt really inspired to like go,
Yeah.
Duke, you should do it. It's really easy. And he was like, he asked me, he goes, well, I don't know what I teach. And I named like three things. Like I said, you could teach this that I saw you do, you could teach this. And I go, and you could call me every week. I go, and I'll tell you what you can teach. You know, so I was really aggressive. And he doesn't need it. You
Yeah.
know, he's so humble, man. His Patreon looks great. And his, you know, he did the Joe Maphis tune, Lorianne, and
Yes.
great. But that's kind of, you know, and I think when he was going to launch it, you know, he called me up and asked me, what? I go, I just go here, here, and here. And, you know, but yeah, I was kind of a cheerleader, but he might be giving me more credit than I deserve, you know. But I'm
Well,
just a fan and want the world to know about Duke Levine. You know, it's great.
yeah. Well, the who of your heroes, you know, one of the things that's interesting. Well, I guess the question would be, if you could check out anyone's Telecaster or guitar in general, who would you want? Whose Telly would you want to check out, or whose guitar?
Well, I just thought like Bo Diddley's square guitar, but that's not a Telly.
No,
Um,
but I shouldn't have limited it to Telecasters.
no, no, I mean
That's just showing my you know,
that would that might be one. I mean, that's what popped into my head. It's kind of a weird
yeah,
one, but, you know. And maybe he had like five of them, but like Bo Diddley's square guitar would be a cool guitar. Um, maybe you know, Hank Garland's Birdland.
yeah,
Um, Definitely Nancy, the Roy Buchanan Telly.
yeah,
I've read people talking about that guitar, and they said it wasn't an extraordinary guitar,
yeah.
but which I found interesting. But it's sure a good looking guitar.
Yeah, because especially like on the back cover of second album, it's like,
Right?
yes, that's the one where you really got the first really the view of that guitar, and it was like, you know, I wanted to put that up on my wall because
Yeah,
like I loved that back cover. But
I
anyway,
love it too.
you hit on another thing that's you know, I kind of asked the question, but kind of had almost had a response in my head, and that's that all these, you know, famous cool guitars, it's so many of them weren't that great, or maybe they were pretty good guitars, but the thing was, it was that the person that owned it was comfortable with it. They're the ones that made it special. Those, you know, it's like friends of mine that have played Dwayne Allman's, you know, guitars, or played all, you know, you get the chance to pick up some, you know, and you expect there to be magic in the guitar, but the magic's in the person. And yes, they felt comfortable with it, but
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's something to be said for a good vintage guitar, but I think it's like a relationship. You know, like you have a relationship with it, and sometimes this guitar kind of, you know, I've worn it out in a lot of ways. That both sides have worn out, and I really have to be careful when I play either outside string. Like this happened, you know,
yeah,
real easy. Same thing here, and I've pushed them on these threads like as much as I can without it being wacky. And sometimes I'm like, you know, that I get annoyed and mad at it. And down in first position, it feels a little crowded for my hand. So I wish sometimes the neck was bigger,
Yeah.
but it's like a relationship to me. You know, I mean, if anybody was in a relationship with me, they'd be like, well, Jim's very irritating. He watches boxing really loud, or whatever. Um, there's
Yeah.
nothing's perfect.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I look at it. And I bet like Roy just had a relationship with that guitar. And he strikes me as the kind of guy who was like pretty satisfied with what he had,
Yeah.
which was a fine vintage instrument that he made magical. So that's kind of how I look at it. But that said, like, maybe I should be a little more curious sometimes about guitars and equipment because I'm not naturally curious about that. One thing I'm really curious, like what I'm curious about is how somebody fingers something.
Yeah.
Uh, I've been messing around with Baby Guitar by Hank Garland super hard. I'll never play it as fast. And it's because I asked Duke Levine, what do you practice right now? That's one of the first questions I ask people.
Yeah.
Like, what are you practicing? How do you practice? And he said, yeah, as usually he's like humble, but he said baby guitar. And I asked Luca, I go, hey, Luca, I had a feeling Luca hadn't learned it. And I said, do you have a transcription? So I'm playing it. And I was talking to Luca the other day and I was like, hey, I wanted to ask you, do you play an open E or do you play a closed E? He's like, no, definitely an open E. And those are the things that I find really interesting on guitar. And what I kind of seek out is how do you, everybody fingers things differently because the guitar is like 3D chess.
Right. Because you can play the same note in so many places.
Yeah. And there's three, three fingerings for that diminished chord. The third one I probably don't know on the bottom four strings. Maybe I better do that tomorrow morning. But there's a different fingering for everything, and that's what I'm interested in. But like a guy like Luca, on the record on two guitars, he plays a 175. I think he plays a Sheridan, plays that Telly, which is like a parts caster, I think, and he played a couple different amps. And to be honest, I don't even know I know this because I had to ask him for another interview for a magazine. And I was like, yeah, okay, come here and sit here and let's play. And the ES 175 sounded, it sounded great. I was like, man, that sounds great. Let's get to work, So I don't know. There was a question in there, and I feel like now I'm just
no. You've answered it, and there's with the guitar, it's like there's so many different places, and it sounds different. Where even though you can play the same middle C multiple places on the guitar, it sounds different, and depending on I think you hit upon a good point is fingerings, and then also that's a great question. What are you practicing right now? So,
yeah. I mean, that to me is okay, you're a person who's been playing 35, 40 years. How do you practice? When do you practice?
Yeah.
Do you practice at night? Do you practice in the morning? Do you start with scales? Do you just,
So answer that question for us, Jim.
Oh,
for you personally.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I set myself up here.
Yeah,
Okay.
you did. You fed me a great question.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, you're the best interviewer on the internet, so I'm not suggesting you haven't asked this. Right now, obviously, I'm practicing baby guitar, and that's a real handful. I mean, and the other thing I've been practicing, like first, I was saying breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. Like breakfast is, I go through progression, like in G major, like we got, I hope I could do it. Sorry, I'm a little rusty. Okay, so that's G major, and then this is Lydian, I guess. So I'll do that in the three minors and the major up chromatically. And that's kind of my warm up. That's breakfast, but it's more like sit-ups, you know?
Yeah.
And then I usually just go into like what I'm working on. Like I was trying to do a little reading, but I'm really lazy about that. And sometimes I don't like that it takes me so long. Like I think this could be more productive, you know, because I want to, I feel a little anxious. So yeah, this week I'm working on baby guitar, and I think I have it. You know, it took me a long time. Like, well, where do you play this? And before that, the week before, maybe for like 2 or 3 weeks, I was playing "Gee Baby Ain't I Good to You," and I heard a Kenny Burrell off Midnight Blue, and I love that record. You know, I always play that record for my students because I'm like, you know, he just kind of plays pentatonic stuff, even though he played with like John Coltrane.
Yeah.
And that tune, the G Baby, I was like, I really like this. And sometimes I will play a song for like a month, like one song. And I try to like exhaust every possibility of that song. Like, well, what's the best key? Where's the best place to play the melody? Okay, chord melody. Then how's it sound if Buddy Emmons played it? Like, what would he do, and is it possible? And I mean, that's like a month, you know, and I've done that pretty much, you know, my entire career. It started with Sleepwalk, actually. I played Sleepwalk for like 2 months, but it's not like I just do the same thing over. I explore all the octaves and harmonics, and I just try and exhaust every possibility of the tune. And for some reason, I don't get bored. I read in a Lee Konitz interview that he said he could play All the Things You Are for the rest of his life. And I kind of related to that, you know, and I respected him for saying it. Like, it's dense enough to where you never explore all the possibilities. And so that's kind of what I do. But I do the warm-up thing, and those change. It's usually something I'm weak on. And I always try to apply them to something, you know, like if I'm doing a melodic, would it be? Yeah. Melodic minor scale. I'll think, okay, this is D7 flat 5 as well. And that's the second chord of do 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 do. You know, this one, what's it called? It's a Duke Ellington thing, you know. Whatever that's called. Like,
Yes, I'm blanking on it too.
yeah, me too. I blank on everything now. But, you know, so I want to make sure and I'll transpose, you know, like, so it isn't just do, 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 you know, I'll think, how do I tell the story, blah, blah, blah.
Is that like, Sophisticated Lady or Satin Doll? What is
it? Take the A train.
Hit the A train, golly. Wow.
Yeah, I kind of played it bad, but
yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Well, Jim, we've gone 2 hours, so we should cut it here.
Okay.
But Jim, I really appreciate you doing this. This was a real treat, and you know, you've been on the short list for a long time, and I hope I hope that you know, when things, you know, open up again, that you'll come to Nashville, and maybe we can, you know, do something in person too. So because that would be a lot of fun. But
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, I hope
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I hope that, the viewers will check out your Patreon, page and check out, the lessons that you have. And, of course, there's tons and tons of great clips of you playing. And, of course, Duke was the last, guest on. And there's a great clip of you and Duke playing Folsom Prison, which is really interesting, seeing the two of y'all, kind of bounce off each other. So, people need to check that out. But, yeah, and then of course the duet, record that you just put out, people need to they need to check it out. So, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to sit and talk with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. It's an honor, and like I said, I'm a fan of your show, and it's really, really an honor just to be a part of it. Like, you have some of the greatest guitarists ever on your show, and your interviews are so informed and with kindness and a good vibe. They're just great interviews.
Well, thank you, Jim, and I'm glad this is part of that collection. So, it means a lot to me. So, thank you.
You bet.